Well, hello, all my amazingly beautiful zodiac family and friends. My name is Libra Empress, and this is another episode of Terror and Tarot with Libra Empress. Today we are going to be watching 3 true creepy horror stories animated by IMR Entertainment. Without further ado, let's get started, shall we?
This happened a few months ago. I'm a 23-year-old female, and I had finally bought a car for myself. I loved driving around and listening to music. I usually liked doing this by myself. On this night, it was around 7 p.m., and it was wintertime. On this particular drive, I took 2 of my siblings. My sister was 18, and my brother was 13. I took them along with me after their constant pleading because they were bored. Now, I'm a smoker, and coming from a South Asian household, women are not supposed to smoke. So I took these opportunities to smoke without worrying that my parents would catch me. The city that I live in has some bad areas. However, we lived in a quiet suburban area. So I didn't give a second thought about parking somewhere, getting out of my car, and lighting up a cigarette. I don't like smoking in my car. So there I was, parked beneath a street light, scrolling away on my phone. It was getting pretty dark, but I wasn't too worried about it, as I would visit this road frequently, and it wasn't too far from my aunt's house. As I was smoking my cigarette, I look up from my phone, and I see a man emerging from some bushes nearby. I didn't think much of it. I see people walking around here all the time. This man was very tall. Standing at least 6'4", he was on the opposite sidewalk. I assumed that he was just going to carry on walking, so I looked back to my phone. Until I looked up again and saw him standing in front of my car, staring at me. My sister, who was still in the car, must have been watching him as well, because she knocked on the window, telling me to come in. I had already put out my cigarette and was making my way to the driver's side door, keys in hand. The man was still standing there, not moving a muscle. I got in and locked my door and breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that maybe I was just overreacting. As I put my keys in the ignition, I looked up to see where the guy was, but he was no longer standing in front of my car. I looked in my rearview mirror and saw that he was now standing behind us. He was taking pictures of my license plate. I slightly rolled down my window, and I could see his face a bit clearer now. He appeared to be an Indian man with a beard and a hoodie over his head, obscuring some of the features on his face. I asked him as politely as I could, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" The man comes towards my window, but still kept his distance. He then said in a very aggressive tone, "Do you know who I am?" I didn't know if he was asking a rhetorical question or not. "I have a lot of shit going on in my house. I don't need you parking here and watching me. You look real suspicious. Just randomly parking here with your 2 friends? What do you think you're doing? Get the fuck out of here." I chuckled nervously. I was trying to keep calm, but my anxiety was already halfway through the roof at this point. I didn't understand how I looked threatening in any way, as I'm a small girl who's been told that she looks like a kid. I was in my pajamas, and I was clearly minding my own business. "Look, I just parked here to smoke. I come here all the time since I live close by." That's when the man got right up to my window. He slid his fingers through the gap and forced my window all the way down, screaming at the top of his lungs, "Get the hell out of here!" I screamed in terror and told him to stop swearing, as I had a minor in the back seat, and he was scaring him. He then screamed, "If you don't get out of here right now, I'll damage your fucking car!" My adrenaline was running at full speed, and I was terrified. I didn't even bother putting my seatbelt on. I bolted out of there, and in my panic, I went straight ahead at a junction. It led me to a dead end. As soon as I stopped my car, I took the opportunity to try and calm down. My whole body was shaking. I couldn't even keep my foot on the clutch. My sister was quick to ask me if I was okay. But before I could even answer, I saw a pair of headlights coming right for us. It was the man. He was going at least 50 on a 20, and he almost crashed right into my car, but by some miracle he just missed us. After his car screeched to a stop, he jumped out, and that's when I realized that my window was still all the way down. I quickly tried to roll my window back up, but the man was too quick. He then dove into my car. Half of his body was through my window. I screamed so loudly with his ear right next to my face that I'm sure I deafened him. He was trying to force my car keys from the ignition, but I thanked my lucky stars that with my car, to release the key, you had to have your foot on the clutch, which I didn't. With one hand, I was pressing down on the horn of my car to make as much noise as possible, so I could alert anyone who was nearby. I scratched his hands away from my car keys, and I heard my poor siblings crying their eyes out. My little brother had no idea what he could do to protect me. I finally managed to force the man out of my car, and that's when he started screaming again. "I thought I told you to get out of here. Now I'm going to fucking kill you, bitch!" The deranged man then attempted to pull my door handle, trying to get inside, and that's when I floored it the fuck out of there. I didn't care that my body was shaking like a fish out of water. My main priority was the safety of my siblings. I knew that we were making a loud commotion. I laid down on my horn, trying to get the attention of anyone nearby, but nobody came to help us. I managed to maneuver my way out of the dead end, and then went down a new street, into a totally different area, and I then parked. I knew that this was probably not a good idea, but I didn't see the guy following us. The three of us just sat in my car, sobbing away. This was the first time that anything like this has ever happened to us. I called the police, and I immediately wanted to punch myself in the face when the dispatcher asked if I had gotten the man's registration number. Of course, in my panic, I didn't. I wanted to slap myself in the face, because I listened to a lot of horror stories on YouTube, and I always felt that they taught me how to handle certain situations. The dispatcher was very understanding, as was the female officer who called me the next day. As a woman, she understood how scary it must have been for me, and I cried to her as I recounted the incident. Unfortunately, the cops informed me that there was no CCTV cameras in that area, so there wasn't really much that they could do, especially with me not knowing where he came from. If he did in fact come from one of the nearby houses, I didn't know which one. The officer apologized to me, but it was really my fault for not mentally noting important information. They made a report of my attack, so if a similar incident happens in that area, they can make the connection. The officer said that when I parked my car, the man was likely doing something illegal nearby, and that's why he freaked out on me. I personally think it was just some deranged individual who enjoyed scaring people who looked like easy prey.
I have been working at a department store for the past 2 years. Although retail wasn't something I wanted to necessarily do, it was much better than my previous job in the food business, so I was grateful to not have to touch food all day, and would take the world of customer service much more gratefully than the food industry. It was the middle of January, and store is usually quite dead towards the end of the day. Usually, the following month after Christmas is never really busy, due to people probably not trying to spend money after the gift-giving season, and the cold weather of the winter season in Canada never really helped the situation much. People not in the mood to leave the comfort of their own houses in the middle of a snowstorm. That meant that they put less people on shift, and I was alone in the fitting room. I work at a pretty big store, and alongside the weather conditions, that meant that the employees were usually spread out on the floor, not within close proximity in comparison to what they put during the busy season. None of us wore earpieces, as we did most of our paging through the speaker system. It was a Wednesday night, around 8, and the store closed at 9. I was usually put on the cash register, but often frequented the fitting room when they needed the help. It was a very quiet night, and I spent the first couple of hours of my shift helping organize the beauty section that is right next to the fitting room, or go speak to my lovely coworker who worked in the jewelry section, helping the few customers that actually wanted to try clothes on when they came by. There was a man who came to the fitting room with 2 dress shirts, and I didn't think anything of it. After all, he was nothing I've never seen before. Older, tall, kind of stocky, muscular, plain. I did notice that he seemed dressed rather nicely. A clearly expensive suit and a nice shoulder bag. I assumed he must have come to the store after his day at work. I counted the number of articles he was bringing in, as that was mandatory in order for me to monitor the flow of clothes and try to stop theft. Handed him a number corresponding to the number of articles he was taking in, and asked him politely to put the clothes back on the hanger, in French rather than English, because Quebec requires us to speak French first to customers. To which he replied with a simple, "No problem." I noticed he had a thick accent, although I wasn't and still not able to place my finger on it. I think it might have been Russian, but I can't say for sure. The man walked into the fitting room, and I didn't think much of it. I helped the other customers who came out of their rooms, counting the articles they came out with and matched it with their numbers, and hung them back in their place on the rack. A few moments passed by, and the man came out. Not really putting much thought into it, I took the both dress shirts from him. He didn't want any of them, and took back his number, said thank you, and turned to place the clothes on their rack. Usually, this was the point where the customer would just leave the fitting room, but when I turned around to go back to the front, he was still there. I asked him if there was anything I could do for him, or if he still wanted the shirts that I had just put away. The man smiled and looked at me, not answering, and I felt a weird feeling in the pit of my stomach. He was looking at me as if he wanted to say something, and me, being the 5'4" girl who hates confrontation of any kind, just nervously laughed and started to organize the desk at the front of the fitting room entrance, awkwardly arranging all the numbers, although they were already in order. He asked for my name, to which I just looked down at the name tag I was wearing and repeated it. He told me it was a beautiful name. I laughed nervously, never knowing what to do in these sort of situations, and being nice to him was a part of my job in customer service. Besides, he didn't do anything wrong, just complimented me. I said thank you and looked away, avoiding eye contact. He then just stood there for what felt like 20 minutes, but in reality was just 3. He stood there as I helped other customers, and it was beginning to make me feel very uncomfortable. Not wanting to be rude, but also not wanting to subject myself to being uncomfortable for the rest of my shift, or however long he was planning to be there, I asked him if there was anything else he needed help with. Here's where I began to get scared. He then proceeded to tell me that he will be waiting for me at 9:30 outside the doors of our store. He wanted to take me out. Confused, I looked at him oddly. How did he know that we finished at that time? The store closed at 9, and we usually spend 30 minutes cleaning up the store. I suppose that information isn't hard to guess, but it still felt weird. Why did he want to take me out? I once again laughed nervously, because that seemed to be the only thing I was able to do when uncomfortable, and politely declined, saying I had to get home and study. He laughed, taking a step closer towards me, and I instinctively took a step back. He didn't accept that answer because he just smiled once more. I'll be waiting for you outside the door where all the employees leave from, in the truck alley. I'll be there. There was a door that employees exited the mall from because the normal doors usually locked around 9:15, and we always finished later than that. So we take the door that takes us in a slight alley where all the trucks go to drop off shipments from our store. Being someone who hates confrontation and who doesn't do well with controlling my emotions, I felt myself start to tear up at his comment. No employee is allowed to mention the door we leave from. It's a company rule. Since we usually finish late and the parking lot is dark, they don't want anyone to know where we exit from, as a precaution. I told him once more that I appreciated his offer, but I wasn't interested, and I had to continue my work. I politely told him to leave, when he put a hand on my shoulder, and I felt myself freeze up. I remember thinking, praying that one of my coworkers would show up to pick up the rack, or the jewelry employee would stop filling the cases and turn around. Obviously, with my luck, nobody did. He told me I was a pretty girl, and he couldn't wait to meet me in the alley at the end of my shift. He said he has a nice apartment and a cute dog, as if the dog was going to make me change my mind, and we could have a fun time. Desperate, I said I had a boyfriend, and he was going to be picking me up, hoping that would deter him, but he just laughed. He said my name, and then he told me that wasn't something that usually stopped him, placing his hand on my shoulder this time. I honestly really began to feel scared, and excused myself to use the phone on my desk, shaking his hand off of me that I hadn't realized was gripped on me so tightly. paged the number for my coordinator, who curtly replied before I was even able to get a word in that she was busy with a customer, and hung up. Unsure of what to do, as the man was still next to me as he followed me to my desk, I called my manager, who thankfully replied. When he saw that I was speaking with someone on the phone, he left the fitting room, but that didn't make me feel any better. I told my manager what had happened, and with good reason, she freaked out, telling me I need to report him immediately, reminding me that with people like that, I really have to be careful. She told me to call security, to which I did, and the security guard told me he had an eye on him through the camera. It was around 8:30 at this point, and I was getting ready to start my closing tasks, still paranoid about what the man had said. To be fair, I am a paranoid person, and I watch way too many murder documentaries, so I may be overthinking. This sounded like the beginning of an abduction movie, honestly. I kind of calmed down, not seeing the man anymore, when the security guard called me back. He wanted to let me know that the man had never left and was circling the store. I felt more dread than before pop in my stomach. He didn't leave? Thankfully, he hadn't come back to see me. I felt kind of better for the fact that the security guard had seen him, so if anything did happen, there was someone who was able to identify him. Once again, overthinking. By the time the store closed and it was time to leave, two of my coworkers, Evan and Ethan, two boys who worked in the warehouse, made sure to walk with me all the way to my car, not letting me be alone. I appreciated it a lot. Although I didn't want to admit it, I was scared walking through that alley, and I was even paranoid he was going to follow me home. I took the extra long route to see if anyone was trailing me, to which he wasn't. When I walked through the safety of the door of my house and locked it behind me, I let go of a breath I wasn't even aware I was holding in. I make sure now to always leave the store using the buddy system. I never walk alone, and I always make sure I'm hyper aware of my surroundings. I never wear my name tag anymore. Luckily, nothing happened to me. And maybe I was overthinking the entire experience, but I wanted to stress that even if your job is in customer service, if someone makes you uncomfortable, speak up. You should not have to be subjected to this behavior at your work, or anywhere for that matter. And to the creepy man who wouldn't leave me alone in the fitting room, let's not meet again. To start, let me explain myself. I'm 5'7", 113 pounds, and I was 16 at the time of the encounter. I'm a multi-sport athlete: track, handball, volleyball, basketball, and hockey, and I have insomnia. This all happened around 2 a.m. on August 10th of 2019. I had been over to my best friend's place because she had just returned home from a vacation, and she had birthday presents for me. Hoodies and gummies, if you're curious. I had spent almost an hour there already, and wanted to head back home soon because honestly, my town is scary at night. Drug dealers, rapists, murderers. You know the deal. So, I waved goodbye to my best friend and started walking down her street. I guess a party had just lit up, because behind me at the end of the road, about 20 or 30 yards from where I was standing, there were a couple of men walking across the crosswalk. They were both pretty tall. I'm guessing between 5'11" and 6'3". The two seemed harmless at first when I looked in their direction, but soon they came to a stop. They were both looking at me. At this point, I felt uncomfortable, so I just kept walking. That's when I overheard one of them say, "Hey, that's a girl." At this, I whipped my head around. They were starting to walk in my direction now, and one of the two men had moved over towards the sidewalk, where there was no light. I knew at this point that something wasn't right, and I began to pick up my pace. They were still getting closer. I didn't know where the second guy was, but when I looked back, the first guy was still following me down the middle of the road. I think that they were planning to cut me off and try to trap me between the two of them. The minute I was about 13 yards from the T intersection, I started to run, and that's when the yelling started. Oh great, now she's running! I hooked a sharp right, and then a left. I could still hear them behind me, and at this point, all I knew was that I couldn't stop moving. I had to lose them somehow. I was coming up to an apartment building with a small parking lot behind it. There were no lights. I made the split-second decision to veer off into the parking lot, and I squeezed myself under one of the cars. I don't know how long I waited there. It could have been a minute, but it felt like a lifetime. I watched the two men run past. They didn't bother to check under the cars, which was definitely in my favor. The minute I felt I was safe, I backtracked and took a different route back to my home. I was too scared to take the main route, in the fear I would have bumped into them. I know what I'm about to say is stupid, but I didn't go to the police. I wouldn't have been able to give them a proper description of the men, because I hadn't seen their faces. If there's anything I learned from my experience, it's that no matter who you are, you need to be extremely careful. You can think that the part of town or city that you live in is safe, but that really isn't the case. There is no protective barrier to keep out people with bad intentions. Please, whatever you do, watch your surroundings as if your life depends on it. If I had been listening to my music and not paying attention, I hate to think what could have happened to me. I hope that no one else has to experience the fear that I did. It was almost like prey being chased by predators. And to the men who followed me, let's never meet again.
Well, that was 3 true creepy horror stories animated by IMR Animation. Alright, they are really talented. I know I do a lot of these videos, but I really like their stories. They're down to earth, and I really appreciate IMR for existing. Because, I don't know, they're really great, right? They've got great stories, they're relatable to normal people like us. Even if they're cartoon. Alright, I think that's why I like it, the colors and stuff, besides the story. Alright, so while I was discussing and, we were watching the show, the episodes on there, I pulled 5 cards from the dead spread to tell us more about who we're going to be connecting today with, alright? So the person we're connecting today was someone who was, someone who wasn't very great at prospering independently, and their confidence was very low. Very, very low. I'd say that, looking back on their life, they felt alienated, as if no matter what they did try to reach out and make friends and, feel happy and, do the stuff that other people struggle or don't have to struggle as much with, but they struggled with communicating with people and relating. Those people who come off awkward as all hell. I'm one of them. This person definitely came off as awkward, and they weren't meaning to, but they did, and they couldn't help it. I like awkward people, so. But the point is that the lesson that you'd want to share is that life is full of burdens and responsibilities, and you're going to be juggling. And, they were burdened. They were so burdened. I think at times they felt burdened with themselves, and they don't want you to feel as burdened as they were, They want you to know they're okay. They're definitely okay, alright? They're definitely okay. Now, something they wish they had paid more attention to in life would have been traveling, doing what they wanted to do, being on the move, possibly a Cancer. Maybe they are a Cancer energy. Maybe they had Cancer in their placement. Maybe you're a Cancer watching this, right? Or you have it in your placement. The point is that they wish they'd paid more attention to either this person or to traveling to meet family and friends, and doing what they loved. I think that this person just got really sad. A message they would like to give you is to not give up, to keep fighting to keep fighting for what's yours. Stay stubborn, okay? But don't stay stubborn all the time, alright? Know when to relax and chill pickle. They could have also been dealing with a Libra, a Gemini, or an Aquarius. Yeah. Alright. I love you all. Thank you so much for listening to me. My name is Libra Empress. Please don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share. And I will see you for next week's Terror and Tarot with me, Libra Empress. Yeah, so stay safe. Love you. Bye, my friends. Have a great weekend.